right, there's the recording.
Yeah.
That one's recording.
And our mics live.
They're on.
All
Yeah.
right,
Looks like Derek is saying.
we're good. All right, thank you. We do have quorum. Don't see Brett yet. With that, we can still go ahead and call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock. And the meeting in particular for this audio is the February 7th, 2022 Design Review Committee meeting. And for the record, appointed members Gresham and Hurd are at this meeting via Zoom, and in the chambers are planning official Thornborrow and Commissioner Labrie has just joined, and Hanna Veal is a planner. Are there any changes to the agenda? I might note that there are two items. Item number 6A under old business and item number 7A under new business to be moved. That should be moved to the consent agenda as they are continuance. One is an indefinite continuance, does not have a date certain. And then the second one is to a date certain of February 22nd, 2022. So if there's anybody online or in person that wishes to testify on the item design review fiscal year 2022 number 1, and that's an application at 6845 North Gardner Lane, that will be put on the consent agenda to be moved to the next meeting on February 22nd. And with that, does anybody wish to approve the consent or move to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Perfect, thank you. And then we can move right into the subdivision SUB fiscal year 2021, number 10, Petra Point Townhomes, which is a combined preliminary final plat request processed as a plan unit development for a property at 4900 Allworth Street. And Craig Kolchak is the applicant, and it looks like he's online. I'll turn it over to you to present the application. Mr. Kolchak. You are on mute.
Unmute.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, we're proposing a 8-unit development on the corner of 49th Street and Allworth. It's a 0.671 acre lot zoned R3. These townhomes are approximately, well, there are 4 plexes on either side of a common drive. There are 3 bedrooms with a single car garage and a 21.5-foot driveway. The facades are going to be composed of various materials such as batten board, culture stone, and fiber cement siding. Projections and recesses will create a further visual interest. Overall, the development will enhance the visual character of the community. Development will be safe, sustainable, and convenient, and enhance the quality of life of its residents, and will be located less than 1 block from the bus stop at 49th Street. Although I think that bus stop now has been removed. Am I correct in that statement? Anybody?
Yes, you are correct in that statement.
Okay, thanks, Hanna. With the development's going to promote walkability and feeling of the neighborhood. We believe that the buildings are well within the requirements set forth in the Garden City Municipal Plan. Each requirement is specifically addressed within the application. Any questions?
Any questions of the applicant at this time?
Not at this time.
All right, then we can turn it over to staff for a staff report.
Good afternoon, committee members. Just let me share my screen here real fast. Can you all see my screen? All right.
Yes.
So good afternoon again, Hanna Veal, Associate Planner at Garden City. This application, known as Subdivision Fiscal Year 2021-00010, is a subdivision application that is processed as a planned unit development. As a planned unit development, the applicant can submit waivers, and they have submitted waivers to these code standards. However, based off of further analysis by staff, there are a few other waivers that I have come up with that the applicant will either need to be in code compliance with or ask for these waivers. The first waiver is to Garden City Code 85A5 Design Standards for Pressurized Irrigation System Installment. The applicant wishes to not install a pressurized irrigation system. However, this waiver can only be granted if it is in compliance with state statute. And the Garden City engineer has made some comments regarding this waiver, stating that if the applicant wishes to move forward and not install pressurized irrigation, there needs to be an easement created along the Thurman Mill irrigation ditch to the northern property line. And an easement going down the common drive, so that way those properties at a later date can get irrigation if they want to.
So the,
Um,
excuse me,
it's-
the irrigation that you're talking about is pulling it out of that ditch to the north?
That is staff's understanding. Yes.
I don't think that ditch is adequate for that. It's an open ditch that's probably a foot wide and sporadic at best. And currently we're trying to work with the irrigation company. Actually, I've already talked with the irrigation company and the land over to the west to eliminate that canal that's in between the north of our property and our property, and install an additional head gate. Right now, this is kind of an old picture where you've got the red line on Allworth that goes into the turquoise line. There's a group of trees over there that used to be a trailer that's no longer in existence. We're planning on putting that there and follow that back to the alignment of the original ditch to continue service to the west on that. Talking with the irrigation company, that's a private lateral that they aren't concerned with. Matter of fact, they don't care as long as it doesn't affect their main line. Currently, it's kind of a liability. I'd hate to have some little kid fall in that ditch and drowned, or a dog drowned. It really serves no purpose currently. It's kind of a big liability, and we're trying to work that out with the landowner. He's totally down with putting in a head gate over there to the west and tying that in with another head gate so he can have access. To him, that irrigation ditch is kind of a pain in the behind for him as well. It's not on our property. It's actually on the property to the north. I talked with the developer on the north, and they're totally down with getting rid of that ditch as well for the same reasons of liability issues.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah, so the second waiver, since we have discussed that irrigation waiver, is So the second waiver is asking for having more than 4 dwelling units on a common drive. That is a provision found in the subdivision standards, which limits only 4 lots being accessed off of a common drive. So this waiver needs to be granted to allow for more than 4, the 8 requested. There's a third waiver, which is a waiver to Garden City Code 84D5. And it's a waiver for the required number of off-street parking spaces, allowing for 1 enclosed vehicular parking spot per dwelling unit versus the required 2. So allowing for about half of the required parking spaces for the dwelling units. There's a fourth waiver asking to waive Garden City Code 84E3 clear vision triangle standards, allowing for class 2 trees, columnar in nature, to be within that clear vision triangle and maintained to an 8-foot canopy. What the applicant has proposed is 2 trees within the 2 clear vision triangles on the landscape plans. And this is permitted so long as those trees are pruned and maintained to have that 8-foot clear vision triangle. There are an additional 2 waivers that staff has drafted in the decision document. The first being setbacks, or a waiver to setbacks, allowing for custom setbacks within the development. And as these setbacks would need to be noted on the final plat. Otherwise, all other setbacks within the development would go back to the base zoning district of the R3 zoning standards. And the second waiver that staff has presented and drafted in the decision document is for the guest parking spaces, as this development has not proposed any guest parking spaces in the property. The design review committee will need to determine if these waivers that I have mentioned are appropriate. And if the committee determines that 1 or 2 or more, and not all of them are appropriate, the committee can decide which ones are approved and where code compliance needs to be achieved. Unlike so many of the planned unit development applications that we have recently seen come through the commission or the committee, this application does not have 10 dwelling units proposed, rather it has 9. And as it only has 9, there is no need for a variety of housing types. Code compliance issues have been highlighted throughout the staff report, and I can speak to a few of those today, but to keep time short, I'm going to stick to the most relevant or prevalent code compliance issues. The first being that there was not enough information provided for staff to thoroughly review the landscape plans, nor was there enough information for staff to thoroughly review the common open space details. I say this because the submitted materials did not include the existing single-family home in the details of the landscape plan, as there are existing trees and existing landscape, and that any of that open space found on that lot, which is lot 10, was not included in any kind of common open space calculation. Rather, it was just created as a lot, and none of the information was provided as to the existing conditions on that lot. Staff has concerns with overall connectivity of the site, particularly that of pedestrian, bicycle, and even trash access. The most concerning, or I'll start off with the most concerning, is the lack of coordination with the adjacent parcels to complete the identified bike and pedestrian pathway. There is an existing pedestrian and bicycle pathway in the developments to the north of this property. As seen on this shared screen, you can see that there's a blue area, which is currently the existing pedestrian and bicycle pathway. It goes through Legacy Apartments there to the Greenbelt, and then the parcel that looks like it's barren right now is actually under construction. It's River Point Subdivision, and they are constructing a 10-foot wide public pedestrian and bicycle access pathway. This subdivision does not propose that continuation of the pedestrian and bike pathway, despite it have been identified by the city. It was originally identified during the drafting of the Garden City 8-3D Neighborhood Commercial Node Ordinance in 2007, in conjunction with the purpose statement of the Garden City Code 8-3D Neighborhood Commercial Node. The application is in direct opposition of the comprehensive plan's future land use designation of the neighborhood commercial node, as it is in this neighborhood commercial node. And it's also in conflict with the comprehensive plan's goals. Goal 5, objective 5.5, 5.5.2, and goal 7, objective 7.1 and 7.3.1, which in summary, they all speak to creating more connectivity within the city and creating more pathway systems for bicyclists and pedestrians. Staff has drafted a condition requiring that the connection be made to the River Point subdivision along the north. That way this connection can be completed. And as required by Garden City Code, that there shall be an easement created for this public pedestrian pathway, and it needs to be at least 12-foot wide with an at least 10-foot wide prepared travel way. Additionally, this pathway will be required to cross the Thurman Mill irrigation canal to make this connection. This is the irrigation canal that I was speaking to earlier regarding the irrigation waiver. It is wide enough to where there will need to be some kind of bridge constructed across that canal. But as far as the details go, it needs to be coordinated with the Garden City engineer and staff and the applicant. There is conversation or concern about a fence being proposed along the perimeter of the subdivision. The subdivision proposes a 6-foot tall vinyl fence along the side and the rear property boundary lines. While it is technically code compliant in height and in material, staff doesn't recommend this material at least being proposed, as it completely ignores the natural amenity of the canal and the adjacent subdivision of River Point subdivision. That River Point subdivision, through discussions, was required to address the natural waterway. And as conversations go on with this subdivision, staff thought that that same conversation should be brought up and trying to acknowledge the canal instead of turning its back on it by putting up a fence, or at least a vinyl fence. As a planned unit development, the application is required to create a more useful pattern of open space and recreational areas. And additionally, Garden City Code 86B7A requires that every planned unit development establishes a development pattern which preserves and utilizes natural topography and geologic features, scenic vistas, trees, and other vegetation, and prevents the disruption of natural drainage patterns. So by proposing the 6-foot tall closed vision fence between the development and the irrigation canal and the adjacent subdivision, this subdivision could essentially be turning its back and eliminating what could be a pleasant common open area and natural feature amenity. Another concern staff has is regarding or surrounding the landscaping and tree protection provisions. The subdivision has submitted a landscape plan. Again, it is only partially complete because it does not include the existing site conditions, specifically that of lot 10, which has the existing single family home on it. But the proposal, or the landscape proposal, only has Franz Fontaine columnar English hornbeam street trees along Allworth Street. It's a mouthful. But these are technically class 2 trees, so it does technically meet the Treasure Valley Tree Selection Guide. However, they are columnar in nature, and columnar trees, as discussed through many design review committee hearings, are not meeting the intent of street trees, and that it doesn't provide for a dense urban tree canopy. It has been conditioned to require that they provide different street trees, or at least work with staff regarding providing more variety of trees throughout the site in accordance with Garden City Code 8-4I. So as a final note, the design review committee is a recommending body today, and you have the opportunity to either recommend approval, recommend denial, or ask that the applicant comes back at a later date to address all of staff's and the committee's concerns. I would like to note that if you do recommend denial, the application is going to planning and zoning on the 16th, where they will also get another recommendation. And if it is determined that the subdivision is denied at city council, then they cannot return until a year later, 365 days in the same shape or form. So another subdivision similar to this cannot return. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you indicated that there's 9 units. Is the existing residence considered one of the units in this PUD?
Yes, yeah. There's a total of 9 dwelling units on the lot, but there are only 8 new townhomes being proposed.
Okay, and so then it doesn't appear that the existing residence and its surrounding yard area is contemplated in the overall PUD relative to the landscaping design or anything. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Although we've resubmitted a landscaping plan that shows the landscaping, the trees in the house on the overall landscaping plan. I did that about a month ago.
Right, there was a resubmittal of a new landscape plan. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it did not appear to identify the class or the type of tree or any of the shrubbery on the existing lot. But it does identify the location.
I'd have to check the notes on the landscaper, the landscape architect that put that together.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff?
I have a quick question. The neighboring subdivision, they have their connection pathway designed already. Is that in conjunction with the numbers that you said earlier? I think it was a 12-foot wide easement with a 10-foot wide travelway. Is that how they've proposed that?
Yes, that's how it's been proposed and approved in the construction plans. And I don't know its exact status of construction, but I know the subdivision as a whole is getting constructed.
And to clarify, there is an easement on record already.
Thank you.
Are there any individuals online that wish to testify on this matter?
I would.
If you wouldn't mind, who is I? Could you state and spell your name for the record, please?
Craig Kolchak, 4839 Mountain View Drive, Boise, Idaho.
Oh, wait. Craig, after the public hearing, you'll get the last say. So we're going to open this up to public hearing.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Is there anybody else online that wishes to testify on this matter? How about for those of you that are here in person, do you wish to testify on this matter? All right, we will close the public testimony portion and then we can turn it back over to you, Mr. Kolchak.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can. Excuse me. We will not close the public hearing.
I'm so sorry. I struggled to get my thing here. I just want to get, can I start? Is that okay to start?
Yes, is this Mr. Don May?
This is Mr. Don May. Yes, it
All
sure
right,
is.
thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to let you know that I do support the project as proposed. And in particular, I support the parking reductions. I highly encourage the board to dive into this Yale-educated UCLA urban professor, Dr. Donald Shoup's free fact-based research. He's done research for across the country for hundreds of cities, both large and small. And Garden City is not unique. In fact, one might say it is quite generic when it comes to parking needs. His principles apply to Garden City equally. Parking legislation should be made using facts as its guiding principles. And on the street have wrongly been decried as being a resource when in fact parking is not free. It's a precious commodity that should be managed and paid for by people with cars using parking meters and parking permits. Local residents can be provided parking permits as well. So public on-street parking managed in conjunction with City Council. I guess the point that I wanted to make is that the reduction, it should be up to the developer to decide the amount of parking. Certainly the people who go and either rent or buy will know ahead of time the parking restrictions that are placed on the property. And it's really up to the city to properly manage that quote unquote free parking that surrounds it, that's open to the public. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. May. Is there anybody else who wishes to provide testimony online? Now I'll go ahead and close the public testimony portion and turn it back over to Mr. Kolchak for any rebuttal that he wishes to provide.
Thank you, Hannah. Do you want me to state my name again?
No, I think the record will show it's you speaking.
Okay, it's me, I promise. Hannah, could you pull up that overhead again of the site?
Yeah, do you want
The one
the
that's
one that shows the pathway?
red and stuff that shows the pathway.
Yeah, give me a second.
Okay, thanks. And Hannah, do you also have a copy of the proposed plan for Petra Point?
The what? Sorry.
The proposed site plan for Petra Point? It's one
Yeah.
thing. So let's take a look at this drawing first. And I'll kind of explain to you why I'm against this pathway. It's a couple of different reasons. If you take a look at the northwest corner of the property above us, there's a pathway that comes down through there and lines up directly with the other side of the fence, the other side of the property. That if you took a straight line, that's the line that would go back to the street. In addition, if you take a look at where the turquoise line comes into the green belt at the top, if you travel down at a 30-degree angle to Mystic Cove Way, you'll see a large entrance into that a green belt. And talking with the neighbors that are to the east of us, everybody uses that point to get into the green belt on that way. There's a clear pathway to green belt from the middle of our property down the sidewalk to that green belt. There's already a pathway there. In addition, could you pull up the site layout of the proposed subdivision? Please.
Yes, once it loads.
Thanks. Sorry.
Does the landscape plan work?
Oh, yeah, it might. Yeah, I think so.
This is the new landscape plan.
Yeah. And so if you take a look on the left side of that drawing, which would be the west side of the property, the backyards are 15 feet wide. If we were to go back in there and do a 12-foot wide easement and a 10-foot wide pathway, would essentially have a 3-foot wide 3-foot depth backyard in the back there. Not only that, but in addition to that, you'd have people traveling in that backyard that would be a security risk to the people that have those units there. The advantage that the property to the north of us has is they don't have an existing property with a house and landscaping and everything else where the shed is, where the actual address of 4900 Allworth is. So they've got the same amount of units, but we've got about 2/3 of the size of the property that they have. And so by I don't know, hook or crook, putting that in there is going to really affect the layout that we have here and make this a very difficult property to have. If we do put it in, it's going to eliminate the livability and the community sense of the neighborhood and increase the likelihood of security issues with the neighbors that are to the east of that pathway. There's already a pathway to the greenbelt along the sidewalk that's been in existence since the 70s, I guess. That pathway there is used by everybody in the neighborhood, except for, and I would challenge to say that some of those people in the apartment building would also use that. So we've already got a connectivity to the greenbelt that's, if you straighten everything out, is about the same distance from putting that red line and the blue line together as opposed to going around the other way. I believe it's like 490 feet to the greenbelt access to the east of our property, as opposed to going at a northern and kind of angular deal to the east to the greenbelt above. And that's the main reason that I don't think that we should be required to put that pathway in there. It greatly damages and affects the development of this size. And originally, I think that whole pathway should have been going on to the west of the property line that we have. And I think the reason it wasn't initially is because of that trailer. That trailer is no longer in existence. Anyway, as far as the fencing to the north of our property, I'm totally in agreement to eliminate that fencing, or have it open fencing or whatever. I totally disagree that an irrigation ditch that's only flowing with water a couple of months out of the year is an amenity. If anything else, it's a liability. I'd hate to have some young child or somebody's dog drown in that irrigation ditch, and it's only open for a short period of time, and the rest of the time it's dirt and weeds. Not a very, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be an amenity, more of a liability to me. And it's not on our property anyway, it's on the adjacent to the north property. With that in mind, if you take a look at the 7.5 foot landscaping strip to the north, should anybody want to keep that ditch, I took that into consideration. And by doing that, assumed there'd be a 15-foot right-of-way total. I split that in half since our property is not on the ditch side, and that would allow the 15-foot easement through there, if indeed that's what it was. That's the total reason why I did that layout to begin with. Anyway, that's basically all I've got. To sum it up, ditch, not an amenity. 2, the existing pathway would damage the livability of this development and increase security issues with people walking by in somebody's backyard. The 3-foot backyard is not okay. And that would take up the 15-foot setback requirement for that backyard by eliminating or by including that 10-foot and 12-foot easement. And that's all I have. Oh, to address the parking issues, it's a single car garage, and it's basically, we've got paving on both sides of that unit. If you go up the driveway here, that's basically all concrete anyway. You've got a 21-foot wide driveway that could second as guest parking. The other parking would be inside. And like the gentleman said before me, Don, I didn't catch his last name. You know, you're going to sell this house to certain peoples, and they're going to know that there's only a single car garage in there. And we're looking for, you know, empty nesters that don't have a lot of vehicles and are just looking for a place to call home as a base unit and then do their traveling and fun adventures on the side. Anyway, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll turn it over to the committee to ask questions and have discussion at this point.
Just a question for staff on this is what's being put in front of us here for our recommendation. It's the preliminary and final plat. Is this something that, as far as the vertical construction component, that we would be seeing at a later date? Or are we to be reviewing this at this time?
The design review application was submitted simultaneously with the PUD.
Yeah, that was a question for staff.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Brett.
No problem.
Brett, if you're asking if you're reviewing the elevations proposed today, yes, you are. This is what would be recommended to City Council as far as the design of the structures and what would ultimately be approved or denied. But if approved, then that's what they would be constructing.
Okay, very good.
I guess one thing that's not a part of the record, and we can link it up as part of the record. But last week, Compass provided a traffic model for Glenwood to the city to review. And one thing that I found was very notable in that modeling work that they did was the impact that anticipated traffic on Glenwood will have on the local streets, in particular Adams and Allworth in Garden City, in the amount of additional traffic as the region's growing, as Garden City's growing, what's anticipated on Adams Street. And I certainly can get that as part of the record to the committee. And I guess I have access to forward everybody an email right now with it. But I do note that I'd like to include that as part of the record, just the traffic constraints that will happen if the model is anywhere near correct on Adams Street, vehicular traffic. Another issue that is concerning is the Republic, to me, is the Republic Services comment about if they do service this, they'll have to back out onto Allworth Street or cart the carts directly onto the street. Again, knowing that this will be quite a busy street anticipated in the future.
I need to ask a question for staff on the elevations. There's a lot of resubmittals. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the latest ones. Were they the ones? Submitted in November, or is there elevations after that?
There, from what I can recall, there was only one submittal of the elevations. However, there was an additional submittal of the plat identifying a new connectivity or sidewalk through the site from the sidewalk to the primary entrances of those buildings, as well as like those end units facing Allworth. The only change is that there is a sidewalk to the primary entrance. I don't remember there being new submittals of elevations.
So I'm looking at the elevations and I'm not seeing an elevation that would front Allworth.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's not there.
Yes, that does not exist. They're all facing the internal drive.
And Hannah, can you do me a quick favor and email me those most current elevations? I'm having trouble downloading off the Garden City site right now.
Yeah, give me a second.
Yeah, thank you.
Derek, if you want, I can share my screen just so you can see it real quick.
Yep, that's fine too.
There was a resubmittal that added some sconces to the front elevations. And that was done back in, I think, December. And you've got them right there. There you go. Okay.
Yeah. So that's all we see, and we don't see, as I'm catching up here, we don't see the side elevations, but we can kind of, if I extrapolate around the corner, I see, yeah, I just see from the plans, I just see the door.
Yeah, the overall, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then Hanna or Jenah, just to talk about that pathway again for a second, in the big picture plan, not the site specific plan, but in the big picture plan, that pathway also continues on the south side of Allworth through undeveloped land and then maybe hooks around through the vineyard, or not? Is it just on the north side of Allworth?
Yeah, so the long-term plan is to connect that pathway to the south going through the Vineyard Church property area. And then I forget the name. Is it Bradley that it would terminate at essentially?
Yes. Yep.
As of right now.
Yep.
That's the plan.
Which it looks like, you know, it looks like in an aerial from Allworth all the way to Bradley is either undeveloped or, you know, kind of open vineyard parking. So that would make for quite a substantial connection in the future
Yes.
to connect what's already existing through the legacy apartments and then what's being built currently right next door. So I don't see, you know, considering we're in the discussion time now, I don't see, you know, any substantial, you know, exception to the rule that this site should have some different consideration, considering it's already, you know, connected or the ability to be connected from the Greenbelt to Bradley. So to not have this, you know, how many ever years in the making connectivity pathwork plan expressed because of this site would be, you know, unfortunate. So I think that, you know, it's not a matter of this 12 feet taking up 15 feet of a backyard. It's a matter of the site needs to be designed around that 12 feet.
I'm in agreement with that.
I am too, and I would further argue with that bicycle and pedestrian connectivity is absolutely critical on this space, especially considering the reduced parking that is being requested.
Yeah, and I think it was made mentioned by the applicant of, you know, properties to the east are already connecting on Mystic Cove, and that's true at the moment because that is their closest connection. But, you know, we look to future growth and what develops to the south of Allworth, and, you know, and everywhere in between. The people living on this site are going to go out their back door and have a Greenbelt connection rather than going down a busy Allworth and then down a busy 49th to get to the Mystic Cove connection. So it's definitely an important thing. So this site needs to be developed around that.
Yes, I agree. And I will also say there were a considerable amount of potential compliance issues in the staff report. And, you know, I don't want to deny this, but I would like for the applicant to take some more time to actually address all of the other compliance issues, the open space, the common space requirement, the trees, there was the fencing, the trash. I agree with you, Jenna. I think that's a big consideration and needs to be addressed in the design. And I would like to see how the proposed development is going to, the elevations on Allworth. That's very critical, how it looks on Allworth and how it relates to that street and the pedestrian connection to the street. And that's kind of missing in here.
Yeah, and I agree with that totally. The only piece you see is the overhead. And the landscaping plan, we've got a walkway that goes north to south off of Allworth. The front entrance on both those first units faces Allworth. But like you said, on the elevations, it's not viewed as such. So I don't have a problem with giving a little bit more information to you guys as far as the frontage goes at all.
Yeah, and this is particularly challenging too, because it's a corner lot. So, you know, we need 49th Street to be spoken to too. 49th Street can't be an architectural afterthought.
49th Street, there's an existing home there.
Oh, yep, you're right. So you're not developing that.
No.
I'm looking at still.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Initially, I just wanted to do a minor land division and develop that piece by itself, but I couldn't get that to go through. It is kind of confusing with having an existing lot on a development like that.
Yeah, I think I would like to just expanding on that a little bit. Just a more definitive site plan, landscape plan, if you will, that really addresses pedestrian connectivity to the street and each of those front doors and what's happening right now. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I look at it and it's a sea of concrete. And then there's doors into these residences. And if I'm going to be, recommending approval of something, I want to be able to look at this, the documents and say, okay, yeah, this is understandable of what we are approving.
Yeah.
So that later on down the line, when the drawings are coming through and planning's back there looking at it, everybody's clear on what it is we're approving. And there's just a lot of those components that really in a development like this, where all of your the majority of access points are not on the street, they need to have a very strong connection to the street and identifiable connection, so that they can engage with the street just like the front two units are able to engage with the street.
Yeah, and we added that into that design on the final plat. It shows connectivity all the way down through there to the front of the street. I think having a colored version of the landscaping plan might help a bunch. And I do agree with the front elevations facing Allworth, that needs to happen. I know if I was trying to approve this, I'd like to know what the heck I'm approving. So I don't have a problem with any of that. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, you bet. I guess at this point for me, that I would be agreeable to giving the applicant an opportunity to come back with additional information that addresses those issues, the 12-foot access easement issue and how that affects the design and how the design changes and to accommodate that. And the revised, or actually added elevations that we had talked about.
Yeah, and I think we need to yet in this meeting discuss the parking, because that's something that's come up. It's come up time and time again. And in my recollection and kind of in my view, oftentimes the parking is a 1 or 2 kind of thing, not a chop in half kind of thing. And while I do agree with Don May's sentiments, and I've read the Yale articles, and I am a proponent of many of the things that are coming from there, it's, in my recollection and in what we have to look here as a design review committee, it's generally there's a reduction in a spot or 2, but there's a kind of an exchange. There's something that's, a reason behind that. It's not just because, okay, we all agree with this Yale study, so let's just start chopping parking in half. So I'd like to hear the other committee members' thoughts on that and how we address that in this specific application, and maybe overall as a larger picture too.
I agree with you. I think I think there was some bicycle parking. So, we've looked in the past at, okay, 1 or 2 lots because have so much bike parking, maybe using on street for 1 or 2 guests. But a reduction completely in half it's pretty high, and I would need some kind of justification other than we just don't want to.
Right. And sometimes it's, it's kind of a bedroom count thing. Like it's a studio apartment. So, this person is unlikely to have 2 cars. When you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, I can't remember what these are, but you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and it's like, well, yeah, then, maybe it should have more than 1 or no parking spaces. But, if this 8 units was all studios, I'd feel differently about requiring 2 for every unit. So I think that's part of the bigger discussion as well. But what do you think, Brett?
Yeah, I struggle with just we'd like to just do half the amount of parking, and without any kind of reasoning trade-off. And then in addition to that, we're going to eliminate the required guest parking. So I guess I've got a hard time feeling that that's acceptable without some type of rationale behind that. It looks like at this point in time that maybe there's a driveway apron out there that can handle an additional parking. Well, when you come in and now you're adding the 12-foot easement on the one side, well, is that still the case? Do we still have full length parking apron in front of each of these houses that could accommodate an extra vehicle? So then you're talking about, okay, well, with an extra vehicle in front of each, because you still need access to the doorway, that maybe you've got 2 per unit but only 1 enclosed. Well, that's a different story than we only want 1 parking stall per unit. So I guess just firming up exactly what the overall parking scenario is on this when you come back through would be what I would want to see, and what the if we got a couple of on-street parking stalls, given the width of the lot out there, and then the adjacent, the house that still is part of this, the existing house, if there's some parking in front of that as well, maybe those are the things that we look at and say, okay, well, there's a significant guest parking, with the parking for the units, and maybe there's a slight reduction, and that's okay. But just a variance I want a variance for half the parking and no guest parking is something that I don't think I could get behind recommending.
So Brett, and keep that in mind that Allworth is a no parking street on both sides too. So
Oh,
there's no
well,
parking.
there's no street parking then.
Yeah, there's no street parking.
Okay, gotcha.
So there again, there another weird, quirky thing to this lot here. And to address that bike path again, open space to the south, most of that is commercial. I mean, directly across from our property is a commercial site that's got equipment and landscaping, rock and everything else on there. So
Today,
maybe not 20 or 40 years from now, but today. And I guess planning is looking to the future, not just down.
Yeah, I think we've got, some responsibility here to look at this and look what's happened and been already put in place to get down to this point. And now we've got the last chunk to bring connectivity to Allworth and to.
And I don't have a problem with the Allworth thing, but I guess the other thing that I think is kind of strange, if you take a look at that existing pathway that's in the apartment buildings that goes out to the green belt, it goes straight down and then all of a sudden it turns to the east to get on the two properties that we're on, where if you went straight, it'd be a straight shot all the way down to Allworth. And for some reason, they decided not to run that bike path straight down to Allworth, but to turn it and then put it on our two properties, which to me doesn't make any sense. And I've walked around that site and looked at it. And, one of the problems is there's either a lift station or a trash bin or something that's there. And then they just there's a little curve to that bike path and puts it on the property to the north of us and to our property lining up. But originally that would have gone straight down to the west of us. It I don't know, seems like an afterthought rather than going a straight shot down to Allworth. And if you took a look at the overhead, you could see what I'm talking about. I just don't want to get picked on, man. No, but seriously, that design as it stands right now, going through the property to the north of us and on our property doesn't make any sense because it's a straight shot to the west side of our property from that pathway that's there on the apartment side. But at the very last minute, they did a little weep, and it's not even a 10-foot, it's like a 5-foot little turn. It's not even a 5-foot width or 10-foot width like they're suggesting. So you're going from a 10-foot width to a 5-foot width and a little weepy turn around and if you could pull up that overhead, you could see what I'm talking about. There's either a trash bin or something there that's made out of brick, and they kind of went around that and then onto the two properties rather than taking a straight shot to the property to the west of us.
Well, the property to the north of you, though, will have a 12-foot wide easement with a 10-foot path, which is what.
They have 8 units there, but they've got the full length of the property to put those 8 units. We're looking at, they've got an acre or whatever. We've got 0.63 to try to do the same thing. But I think the reason they did that tweaky thing was because initially there was a trailer there. That trailer has been removed, so it's not there anymore.
That would be their discussion to have 5 years ago. Yeah.
Exactly.
Your discussion right now is
After the fact.
we're connecting to what someone else is developing, and we're looking at a plan that was put in place long before any trailer moved or long before the legacy apartments went in. So it's kind of something we're looking at and taking seriously. And I don't think that we can.
Into a 10-foot walkway and then back to a 10-foot walkway again. So there's a little curvy thing that goes in there. It's like an afterthought.
So are there any other issues that you wanted to discuss with us?
Well, on the parking issue, it's not like we just want to get rid of the parking. The design that we have and the width of the buildings only facilitate a single car garage. And we intended to have the parking to adjust that. Now, I agree with Brett when he's talking about 3 bedrooms, and then a single car garage. That kind of, to me, doesn't make much sense either. But the whole intent was, having empty nesters, not looking to do anything, and having a single car garage, which matches up with the width and the number of units we can go in there to make that work. And then with the intent of, I think the code that you've got makes the assumption that everybody's going to have a 2-car garage. And I think that's based on, 2 units covered and then whatever. And that's not the case, not in this day and age when you're talking about, and I know it doesn't mean anything to you guys, but construction costs and the cost of the land, you want to make sure that you can get as much as you can to make the thing work. And when we took a look at this, 8 units laid out okay, but we only have a single car garage in there. And rather than say, oh, we just want to cut the thing in half, it's not the case. It matches the development that we have. Is we've got single car garages on each one of those with the intent of having guest parking in the driveway. And unfortunately, there's no parking along Allworth or Adams or whatever you want to call it. So if I can kind of take away what you guys are saying, is you need an elevation that faces Allworth, so you know what the heck you're looking at. Is that true to say? Okay. You want more information on the landscaping plan to show exactly how we're going to connect the units to Allworth and have some kind of connectivity there rather than just a driveway. We've already done that, but it just doesn't show up very well on the drawing that you've got. I'm going to talk to my landscape architect and see if we could put a little bit more flash on this and put some color in there so we can differentiate from everything. I do believe that initially on the last submittal we did that showed the drawings for those trees, I thought those trees were identified, but that's an easy fix to identify it. And then try to address the, I guess the one thing that kind of bugs me is that there's already connectivity to the greenbelt, and you guys are asking me to do connectivity to the greenbelt in a different way. It's just kind of frustrating when you've got a 20-foot wide access point off of that street to the north of us with a sidewalk that goes all the way up there, and we have to do that connectivity. And I get it because you want to have the whole thing work, but I mean, you've got 2 connections within a couple hundred feet of one another. Anyway, I'm assuming this will be all on the staff report that we have for this meeting, and I can address that accordingly. The only question I have is to Hanna, am I going to have enough time to have the 16th hearing, or should we bump that out?
So are you referencing your planning and zoning?
Yeah,
public hearing on the 16th?
Yeah. Just put that sign up too.
Yeah. So there you have a few options. I might recommend that you request to move that date or that hearing to a later date, just so you can address all of these changes that you're going to be making. We can move you to March or even April.
I don't want
It depends on how fast you can get all these resubmittals into me in order to have enough time to review it.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to get that. Now, we've also scheduled a city council hearing for the 28th.
Right.
How many how many planning and zoning hearings do you have per month?
So for design review, there's 2. For planning and zoning, there's 1. And then city council has 2 public hearings, just based off of it sounding like today's going to end up in your application being moved to a later date.
Yeah, definitely. Should we, and I'm just talking, out loud and spitballing this stuff. Should we have another design review meeting so that we can address the issues that Brett and everybody has on the elevations and the landscaping and stuff, and then review that again before we have another planning zoning hearing? Or how do you want to work that?
It depends on how quickly you can turn around your application materials, but I'm looking at a calendar over here. And my presumption, by the time you get the materials readied into Hanna by the 22nd, so in 2 weeks, that would put you on the 7th.
Okay.
For design review,
Yeah.
the 16th for P and Z, and the 28th for city council. And there's certainly, if there are minor details, you could go back
Sure.
maybe on the 21st.
That sounds good. Can we make that happen? And I'll just put a sticker on my design review.
Yes. So I'll need all your resubmittals by the 22nd.
Cool, super cool. Done.
Did I get the right date? Okay.
So Jenna, do we make a motion to move this to a date certain, I don't know the wording, on March 7th?
I just heard that as a motion, yes.
Yes. And can I add to the motion, for the purpose of the applicant to address all of the comments we raised, as well as those in the staff report, the non-compliance issues?
Yes. You are correct, Maureen.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll see you back here on the 7th.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Brett, thanks for all your input too. And Maureen, thanks for yours as well.
You bet.
All right, you guys. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Take
Our
care.
next item on the agenda is design review fiscal year 2022, number 2. It is for a new construction of a car wash at 8200 West Chinden Boulevard in Damon Beard. I'll turn the floor over to you. Yes, absolutely. Not with that.
Ready for me? Good afternoon. My name is Damon Beard with Arch Architecture Planning. Project I have before you this afternoon is for a new automatic car wash for Metro Express Car Wash located at 8200 West Chinden, which is the intersection of Chinden and Comfy Street. I just thought I'd give you some quick background here. The existing building on the site, and here's an existing plan, is a short automatic car wash with self-service bays.
We can't see that plan.
Oh. I need to share my screen.
We're just gonna go back to.
Need to do that again.
Oh, perfect.
All right, thank you. The existing site today is a small automatic car wash with self-service bays. The intent of the applicant is to demo this and construct a new automatic car wash, which would get rid of all of the self-service bays. And I'm trying to bring up the Hanna, can you help me share these again?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Can you see that site plan?
We're just seeing the survey still at this
Okay.
point.
See the new site plan now?
Yes.
So the new proposed car wash is just under 4,200 square feet. It would front along Chinden Boulevard. In order to do that, we're recommending that we close off 2 existing site access points off of Chinden. One we would maintain as a smaller access. It would be an escape lane only. Site access would be off of Coffee Street where there's an existing site access point where cars would come in to a point of sale station and then continue around a corner, enter the automatic car wash, and then exit on the east side and then be able to leave the site or turn into the site and use some vacuum stalls that we've located there. And I apologize, those are dark because we're showing pavers there as a site accent. Building materials include, let's see if I can do this time. You see that?
Yep.
Split face CMU block, ACM panels, which are just aluminum composite panels, and then a corrugated metal tower on the east end. On the south elevation facing Chinden, we have both storefront glass and glass block. I saw a note in the staff report about the required amount of glazing, and we are currently at 17%, which is just over the 15% requirement since it's not a retail location. On the east, or I'm sorry, on the west and the east end, you can kind of see that we have the aluminum composite panels canted out just to provide some visual relief on that Chinden side up front elevation. And then on the back side of the elevation, again, it's split face concrete block broken up by some vertical ACM panel elements. And again, in response to the staff report, we don't really have any windows on this side because this is the vacuum plaza facing side. So we have a number of vacuums arches that would go along this elevation and then help break it up more that I'm not showing here since they're not part of the building. We recently received our conditional use application approval in a previous meeting. I also have a landscape plan that I can show you. Again, we're proposing to have a 10-foot sidewalk, and so I'm not seeing here on this landscape. This is an old landscape plan.
Yeah, I was going to say that looks like your old one.
Sorry about that. Back to the slide. We did add a 10-foot sidewalk along Chinden. That's the old site too. But I think Hanna probably has the updated drawings that she can show us when I turn it over to her. But we did add a 10-foot sidewalk along Chinden and move the building back into it as part of the pedestrian connection. Landscape, you know, we have street trees on both Chinden and Coffee Street. And then we've added some trees throughout the site. In a response to a staff report comment, there are some grassy areas throughout the site, but the intention with those is to use those as drainage swales as a more cost-effective solution than to underground seepage beds. We have a trash enclosure here, which we're currently showing is 7 feet tall. And my understanding is there's a 6-foot tall limit. We're certainly open to reducing the height of this to 6 feet. 7 feet is what we've typically done in all other jurisdictions to get a decent.
Yeah, not to interrupt or anything, but I think that the 6 foot tall is for fencing height before you need to have an engineered structure, which this would be an engineered structure.
That's right.
So I don't think the 7 foot is 6 foot's too short for a trash enclosure, in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%. We do provide bicycle parking here at the small office element that we have at the west side of the building next to the car wash entry. And that's about all I got for you. I'd be happy to open up to questions that the committee may have, or to Hanna to go over the staff report.
Thank you. Any question for Mr. Baird?
Yeah, I do. Is it more typical for the Metro Express to not do any kind of canopy structure for their vacuum station and just have these standalone little snorkels?
That's typically what we've done, but I do have Bill Martin here, the owner operator, and he may be able to better respond to that comment if you'd like to come up and mention that.
Bill Martin, 219 East 50th Street, Garden City. In answer to your question, we do provide seasonal shade covering. We remove it in the winter for snow snowpack, but we do, it's designed that we can put in a mesh screening for shading. But in terms of a permanent canopy, we haven't done that. Does that answer your question?
Okay, yeah, yes, it does.
Any other questions? And I'll turn it over to Ms. Veal to provide her staff report. Thank you, Mr. Beard. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. This is a design review application for a drive-through establishment, which has already obtained its conditional use permit approval. The property is zone C2, and it is located within the future planning area as well as the Green Boulevard corridor of the comprehensive plan's future land use designations. The Green Boulevard corridor is identified as the state highways and arterials. They're to be drastically changed from the current conditions that you see today along West Chinden, with the intent of these roadways becoming a designation for more multimodal characteristics, including sidewalks, parkways, bus stops, landscaping, medians, pedestrian refuges, and channelized left turn lanes. This application has proposed a pedestrian pathway in alignment with Garden City's comprehensive plan. They show a 10-foot wide pathway running along the entirety of the frontage of Chinden. The property is also within a future planning area, and these future planning areas have been identified as large parcels of land or vacant and underdeveloped parcels of land, including the areas west of the city within the area of impact. The area or the future planning area that this property is adjacent to is the Idaho Transportation Department District 3 headquarters, which is right across Coffee Street. And the large size of these areas, such as the district headquarters, provides a unique opportunity for master planning with consideration for a mix of uses and residential, commercial in nature, and also mix of housing types within that master plan. Streets, sidewalks, and bicycle networks are also promoted in this future planning area. Spaces for public uses, including parks, open spaces, plazas, and infrastructure improvements, such as water and sewer, are mentioned in the comprehensive plan. While this proposal may not be in ideal alignment with the comprehensive plan, it should be noted that the application is improving the site drastically by providing the necessary multimodal transportation, by proposing the multi-use pathway along Chinden and keeping the detached sidewalk along Coffee Street. Additionally, the application is increasing the urban tree canopy from what currently exists on the site, beautifying the streetscape along West Chinden by providing pedestrian-oriented landscaping, and eliminating the vehicular access along West Chinden, or at least one of the vehicular access points along West Chinden. That closure of the one vehicular access point has been approved by ITD, and that is in alignment with their closure access plan that we always reference. Staff did bring up the 6-foot tall trash enclosure wall. It's just simply because it is taller than the 6 foot, which is allowed, and code does directly state that it needs to get approval by design review. So there will need to be an approval by design review here today, considering that it is over 6 feet tall. in code says it. And then as far as the glazing on the facade facing Chinden, it sounds like the applicant was able to calculate those percentages at the 17%, which does exceed the required 15%. There is still a blank wall along the interior, which the committee will need to discuss code compliance and see if it needs to have any kind of treatment. The application does propose to keep the 5-foot wide detached sidewalk. However, the existing conditions show that the detached buffer area is just dirt or gravel, whatever goes into that right of way area. It will need to be improved per ACHD standards. So curb, gutter, sidewalk, and then a 6 or 8 foot wide landscape buffer with street trees. It seems that the applicant is aware of this. It's just not shown in their landscape plans. And then on top of that, there is a proposal for, I believe it's 5-foot wide landscape buffer. Oh, it's showing 6-foot wide landscape buffer between the sidewalk and the drive aisle of the property where cars will exit the car wash. This staff doesn't have any comments regarding it, but it does help enhance that streetscape area, and staff will be working with the applicant in ACHD regarding the landscape buffer. Staff does have a concern regarding the proposed trees on the site. The majority of the trees are class 1, and they're a maple tree, which is characterized as slow growing maples, and they only get to be about 25 feet tall and 15 feet wide. I know the applicant did state that there are a lot of common grass, or not common, but open grassy areas that they want to use as drainage swell areas, but perhaps there could be a condition, and I don't remember off the top of my head if it's already drafted as such, but further coordination with staff regarding the type of tree being proposed on site, specifically maybe even class 3 trees to help increase that urban canopy, especially considering how much hard surface is on the site given its use. I think that's everything. So with that, I stand for questions.
Does the committee have any questions for Ms. Veal?
So do you yet have a site plan that shows the detached sidewalk on Chinden and Coffee?
Yeah, here. You want to stop sharing that screen, David? And I can show.
And then while you're bringing that up, I just see renderings in the packet, and the renderings looks like an attached sidewalk.
So this is the landscape plan, because this is what I had pulled up. It does show the sidewalk as 5 feet right here. Sorry, I'm on my iPad, so I don't have a mouse to indicate it. But it is showing the 5-foot wide sidewalk to the right of the 6-foot wide landscape buffer, or the interior landscape buffer. We will need an additional 6 or 8 foot wide landscape buffer to the right or the east, essentially.
Hannah, is that a condition that's already drafted then, or do we need to put that in there?
I believe it is a condition, or it should be. Let me read through.
I think it was.
Damon's saying he think it is.
Because what you were saying was that they're like, currently the sidewalk's there, but it's just asphalt street, then gravel, then sidewalk. And
yeah, if you refer, oh, sorry. If you refer to the staff report on one of the last pages, there's a little picture with some word art on it indicating or trying to show the situation. Otherwise, you can just go into street view and see the existing conditions.
Got it. But then that plan you have up now on the screen does not show sidewalk on Chinden. Is that correct, or am I?
Yeah, it does. It actually says 10-foot minimum landscape perimeter, and it's actually showing that's the sidewalk there.
That's correct.
So it's misnoted on there, but that looks to be like a attached 10-foot sidewalk, correct? It's not a detached, or is it? No, edge of pavement. Yeah, no, it is detached. There's quite a distance between the pavement and the sidewalk.
Well, just between the OP line and the sidewalk, right? Which is a foot down on the corner, and then it expands out. Oh, EP.
No,
I'm
the
looking
EP.
at OP. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
looking at overhead power. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's at
then,
least another like 15 feet of space there.
But we don't have that noted. Well, there's the misnote of the sidewalk, but then there's no note that says this is landscaping between edge of sidewalk and edge of, like where's curb and gutter and what's detaching that sidewalk, or is the Chinden sidewalk attached?
I don't think there'll be until Shenden's improved there. I don't know that the drainage is handled in any other manner than just that kind of more or less borrow ditch between the sidewalk and the edge of pavement.
Right, and that is all ITD right of way at this time.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, what's not clear on this, the landscape plan here, is what happens in between edge of pavement and sidewalk on both Coffee Street and Chinden? And what is that?
If I may, since the time that this landscape drawing was created, we did receive an ACHD report under which Coffee Street falls. And we would be required to improve half of Coffee Street on our side of the road, and then a landscape buffer between the curb, gutter, and the existing sidewalk.
Okay. And then so on the Chinden side, what happens in that spot there between the edge of pavement and the
Well, right now, my understanding is ITD doesn't have a development plan along this stretch of Chinden. We've tried to get them to comment on it, and they just don't have, they haven't developed their plan out to here yet. So my assumption is it stay as it is today.
And question for staff, what then makes this different? And refresh my memory, because this isn't the first project we've done on Chinden. What makes this different than other projects that it's attached, and attached is okay?
Well, so I guess not speaking for the review on this, what makes the attached? Okay, so everything west of 42nd Street has drainage in place. Everything east of 42nd Street does not. And so it is my understanding that nothing can be done within the existing right of way until there's a drainage plan to address that for all of the properties that are east of 42nd Street. I don't know if that's west of 42nd Street. I doubt that's exactly answering your question. But then in looking at this plan, I had misread it when I first glanced at it, where it looks like note 11 says that those trees are being relocated And I had a question if there's any ability for those trees to either remain or be replaced. So I guess before staff fully answers that, I have that question out there to Mr. Beard.
So my understanding, without having my landscape architect here, is a lot of those existing trees fell in the area where the 10-foot sidewalk was requested. And so that's why we had to relocate or mitigate if we didn't think they were savable.
Yeah, so as far as how I reviewed the application, essentially there is a plan in place for a like a asphalt pathway to go along this section of Chinden, which is Maple Grove to Glenwood. And so the fact that this isn't a asphalt pathway in accordance with that plan, that does speak to attached and detached pathway systems in this section of Chinden. I essentially reviewed it as it is compliant with that plan.
The plan does, go ahead.
Well, don't we normally ask the applicant and try to see whether or not there could be trees on the outside of whether it's a sidewalk or a pathway, whatever that pedestrian connection is? Haven't we in the past asked them to have street trees in that area?
We have asked for there to be street trees along West Chinden. However, we do get comments back from ITD often saying that street trees are not permitted within the right of way. Even if it's not in the right of way, we've received comments from ITD stating that they don't want any of the tree limbs to intrude into the right of way area. So those have been ongoing conversations with ITD on a case by case basis.
I have a question to the applicant. Is it possible to reintroduce the trees to buffer those that are using the pathway from Chinden?
I guess that would be something to coordinate with ITD. I mean, without any specific plan that they have in mind, it could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I mean, it'd be anything we did there would be subject to be torn out when they put in their drainage facilities.
Understandably, but showing this on your property, is there the ability to add those trees in where they're showing that they're being taken out, to just add them back in or to maintain them?
But not maintain the 10-foot sidewalk. That's what my understanding is anything that was removed or relocated was because it was in direct conflict with the pathway there.
So in 20, just commentary, I guess, in 2015, I partook as part of a federal highways study looking at the impediments to pedestrians and bicyclists on Chinden. And I was one of the people that went out there and did the observations. And it was quite telling that even when there are facilities in place on Chinden, individuals tend to move back to the back of them because they're quite uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I do think that Garden City is trying very hard, not only to add pedestrian and bicycle facilities, but those that will be usable when they're installed, and the speed and the way that that road feels for those that might be using your clients' facilities in the future. Making it comfortable would really be beneficial.
Agreed.
I guess I don't understand why the sidewalk is right up against the property line. Why can't it be pulled back a little bit? Sorry, pathway.
So it was indicated to us that we were required to have a 10-foot sidewalk. We originally had the building within about want to say 10 feet of the property line. So we had to push the building back in order to get the sidewalk in and also to maintain a landscape buffer between the sidewalk and the building. And it's the irregular shape of the lot that kind of dictates where the building goes. And we couldn't push it any farther away to buffer the sidewalk with an additional landscape planter without losing parking stalls or required facilities for the car wash.
So question for staff, because I think I'm getting confused here. We require a buffer between the building and the sidewalk?
No, that is not a specific code requirement. That is more of a design standard that the applicant wished to provide.
I mean, we could certainly flip them and put the sidewalk up against the building and the landscape plan or the landscape planner up against the property line, but we just thought it would soften the building by putting the landscape up against the building.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, you know, having some kind of landscaping up against the building, I think is nice. How wide is that landscape buffer?
I want to say it's 5 feet.
Oof, it's not a lot. I'd really like to see some kind of separation. Well, so how much separation between the pathway and roadway pavement?
Probably about 15 feet from the looks of it.
It looks about 15 to 18 feet as it exists today.
I don't know if trees may not be possible. It would be nice to have some kind of vertical
Yeah.
buffer, something more than grass, something higher than grass that separates the pedestrian from the traffic.
And another thing to consider there is we do have overhead power lines that go along the property line there. So we'll be limited in how much vertical we could get before we have a conflict.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking 3 feet.
Yeah.
Just, a tree may not, if ITD is not willing to allow branches in their right of way. Then, something shorter, something that still can provide a physical separation.
A lot of the landscape that the metro folks like to use a lot do consist of vertical grasses that end up getting 3 or 4 feet tall. So that might be something similar to what you're referring to.
Yeah, in between the sidewalk and the roadway on ITD's property, if they allow it.
I guess for me personally, in looking at this, I know it's been a long discussion and a moving target with what can be allowed, and I understand I'm almost positive ITD would not allow trees in the right of way at this point in time on that stretch, but in the past we've seen conditions of approval that allow some flexibility for the applicant to continue try to have that dialogue with ITD to figure out a solution to provide that comfort rather than just wholesale not having those trees there.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it an option to go down to a 5-foot sidewalk and put a 5-foot landscape planter against the? We were told a 10-foot sidewalk, which is what we aim to do, but.
That's not with it. That's not a pathway, I mean, 10 foot is really a minimum for a shared use pathway.
Even if we put some landscaping in without ITD's approval, I hate to burden the owner with that, knowing that he'll have to pay for it only to have it ripped out at an undetermined time down the road. Even if it was minimal, just a few plants just to soften it.
I guess with that being said, if he puts it in and the adjacent property does similar, should it redevelop? My hunch, it wouldn't become a strong priority to come back and redo that infrastructure within the right of way. I guess there's a lot of presumptions on what may or may not happen in the future that we don't know. But if there are facilities in place, which you would be granting an easement for the public use on your property for the indefinite future, there's nothing to say that it will absolutely come back and be ripped out as
Right.
well.
So going through the staff report, trying to figure out if there's anything else that we need to discuss. And it looks like most things have been addressed. The glazing was addressed. We do still need to talk about the 7-foot tall fence or outdoor service area surrounded by I got a question. It says anyone constructing a fence or wall over 6 feet shall obtain design review committee approval. Do we consider it a fence if it's not along a property line? I mean, I guess we do, because we still require people who have internal fences not to use chain link. But that's something that we still need to address, as well as we kind of talked about the landscaping.
And before we go too much further, just to make sure we check the boxes, I'm not sure there are 2 members online to make sure that they do not intend to testify, or if they do wish to testify on this matter as well. Is there anybody that wishes to provide public testimony? Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. With that, I'll close the public testimony and we can continue on with discussions.
So other than the landscaping, it seems the fence was the other big item, as long as the applicant is okay with all of the other conditions that have been included in the draft decision document.
Yeah, I believe we are. And anything, we're happy to work with staff on anything that might need to be continued to discuss.
Oh, and just so you know, hold on, yeah, it is compliant that, or it is a condition that they talk with staff about the street trees that is in there.
And then for discussion, Hannah's report did talk about the area, the ITD District 3 yard, should it redevelop? And I'm curious on the committee's thoughts about the elevation that would face that faces back towards Coffee, knowing that that may be a future tie into more of a completely redeveloped area.
Are you talking about the north elevation?
We can call it the north elevation, yeah.
The northeast elevation, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's why, what was one of my questions regarding the canopy structure on those the vacuum areas, just because in looking at that long blank wall there, an element like that more would integrate that function into the building and help to kind of break up the facade from a maybe more scale giving standpoint, I think would help in my mind.
So if I might, we struggle with that side of the building always on car washes, in that that's the equipment side. So
Yep.
you don't necessarily want any windows in there, but in previous locations, they've put up billboards, which are car wash type graphics to help, at several spots working its way down the elevation to try to help break up the elevation. We'd also be open to the idea of maybe putting some, I'll call it clear story, but that's not, some tall glass block windows in there that would let natural light into the equipment room without compromising the equipment room.
Brett, is that kind of what you're thinking about, or is it something you'd want to see?
No, it was something I was thinking about that could help with that elevation.
I agree with you. I think there's too much blank space.
And where you have that vacuuming function that's directly adjacent to the building and is not, necessarily standing off there, though there are a few stalls that are off separate from the building, to be able to do something that integrates it with the building facade in some way, and i.e. tying it in with a canopy element over those vacuum bays, I think could help with that facade. But I do think that some kind of additional treatment to help break that long CMU wall plane up and add a level of interest on that facade is warranted because of the orientation.
I agree. It's just not deep enough into its own site to not have a visual impact to the neighbors, so.
And I don't know, I guess I would feel comfortable that that's something that the applicant could work through with staff, and if staff felt that they weren't comfortable with the solution and accepting without us seeing it again, that it could come back in front of us. But I think that it's something that they could work with the applicant on. And I really don't have any issues with the rest of the overall design.
All right, I'll try to do one of the recaps. The first of which is that 6 feet is too small for a trash enclosure. To work with staff and ITD to really try to figure out how to get those trees there. And then an element
Trees
Such
or
a-
other, some kind of comfort.
Or some kind, okay. With some sort of separation, bare minimum. And then an element over the back bays, such as a canopy. To be reviewed by staff. And if it ends up being tall windows as suggested as an option, would the committee be comfortable with that?
Sure.
Those are the notes that I took. I was doing a lot of looking stuff up. So please let me know if I've missed anything.
And are we sure that there is a requirement in the draft document that deals with that landscape along Coffee Street? If not, that probably needs to be added in there as well.
Yeah, there's condition number 5. B specifically, landscaping and street trees shall be installed and inspected for compliance with Garden City Code 84I.
Is that, in the staff report, it was talking about working with staff to select the right trees. I don't know if that's quite the same, or is it? Is that what you were looking for, what you were questioning whether or not it was actually included as a condition?
I might suggest that's number 13. All proposed landscaping shall be in compliance with Garden City Code 84I landscaping and tree protection provision. The site shall be approved by this planning development staff. And then it goes on to speak about perimeter landscaping requirements.
I don't think I have any other
Okay.
comments or questions.
I don't either. Just to kind of follow up on the landscaping in whole, I would like, and I think this is something that's generally done, but we've seen in other applications where we have so many versions of the landscape plan, and so many of the versions of the landscape plan don't necessarily speak to what is actually in the design review's mind going to be installed. So if that can all be cleaned up and then submitted, and then when the final version is approved, it's referencing that plan that has it all together, not, 3 or 4 meetings ago, just so that there's a clear direction. And then when something gets built, it's actually what we've kind of been progressively talking about all the way along the way.
Agreed, in that it does not conflict with any approved site design plans that we have done, because sometimes that happens as well. The applicant has one landscape plan, and then it conflicts with what was approved on the site requirements or design. And we're looking at both of them and thinking we have a nice complete plan, and we don't. So just making sure that they're consistent.
I appreciate that. And that's my fault because Hannah has the latest and then I forgot to update it on my little zip drive. But the city.
Oh, no,
does-
it's not you at all. It's just stuff in the past.
Sure. We're on the same page.
Jenna, can I just say, make a motion to incorporate those comments?
Yes.
Thank you. So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then that brings us to the end of our agenda. Unless anybody has any discussion items they'd like to bring up.
I have something that's not design review committee related.
Okay.
Ooh.
Sounds fun.
Should we adjourn the meeting and then just hang out for a second?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, meeting adjourned at 4:54.
So really quick, how does an HOA or a homeowner, I don't want to say it, file a complaint, but basically file a complaint against a development that's occurring that has taken down trees that were supposed to be saved, has placed air conditioning vents on the side of the building in complete view of the public and adjoining landowners. And it was supposed to have been screened both in the approval as well as the HOA approval. Where would I go and make that complaint?
You can tell us, and we'll make sure that it gets passed along.
Okay.
Because if it's during the permitting process, it's best to catch it before any CFOs are issued. And then if it's post CFOs, it may end up becoming a code enforcement issue.
It's pre or not post. It's the stuff that's on the, what is it, northwest corner of Adams and Prospect Way. The new townhomes in the waterfront district.
All right.
Yeah, northwest corner of North Adams and Prospect Way.
Okay. Got it.
You've just made an anonymous complaint.
Yeah.
That's actually.
No, it doesn't have to be anonymous. It does not have to be anonymous. Our HOA is trying to work with them, but they're like, we should probably let the city know as well. So that's all I'm doing. We're trying to work with them and figure out what we can do.
Thank you.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
See y'all.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
See you
Thank
guys.
you so very
Bye.
much appreciate you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.